When Tunde and Adora moved into the new house by the lagoon, it felt like a promise kept. The air smelled of salt and morning sun. Fishermen's songs drifted over the water at dawn, and the palms leaned as though bowing to welcome them. Tunde had always dreamed of quiet after the chaos of Lagos, a place where the mind could think clearly. Adora had found the house herself. It stood at the edge of a small estate in Lekki, not too far from the city, not too close either. Wide walls, blue window frames, and a veranda where they took breakfast on Sundays. From his upstairs study, Tunde could see the lagoon stretch wide and still, except when the wind ruffled it into silver. For the first few weeks, he was simply grateful. Adora laughed easily then. She filled the rooms with her scent, her music, and the soft rhythm of her sandals on the tiles. Neighbors greeted them politely, and all seemed well. But sometimes when Tunde returned early from the office, he would find her gone, her car missing, her phone silent. She always said she had gone to buy fruit or visit the market. Yet, something about her tone carried a pause, as though she rehearsed the answer. One afternoon, while returning from the tech firm where he worked, Tunde noticed a narrow footpath branching off behind their house. It wound between two walls and disappeared into a cluster of mango trees. Curious, he followed it. After about 50 paces, the path opened into a small clearing, and there he saw a cottage, yellow painted, its door half hidden by bougainvillea. A curtain fluttered in one window. On the veranda stood a pair of small sandals, and beside them a basket with empty bottles. He stood for a moment, uneasy. It looked like a place where someone lived quietly, almost secretively. He heard nothing except the croak of frogs by the water. He turned back, feeling foolish. That evening, as they ate, he mentioned it casually. "There is a small yellow house behind ours," he said. "Do you know who lives there?" Adora looked up from her plate, just a moment too quickly. "Oh, that old place," she said lightly. "A widow lives there with her niece, I think. I've met her once or twice. She keeps to herself." Her eyes moved away as she spoke. Tunde said nothing more, but the image of the little sandals stayed with him. The days passed on eventually after that. Work absorbed him, and Adora seemed happy again, humming around the kitchen, talking about repainting the bedroom. Still, once or twice a week, she disappeared in the afternoons. He tried not to care. He told himself that every woman needed her space, that marriage was not a prison. But the thought of that yellow house, quiet, hidden, half forgotten, began to trouble him like a shadow in the corner of a dream. One Saturday morning, he decided to follow the matter no further. He had work to do, reports to finish, clients to call. But as he stood at the window, sipping coffee, he saw Adora crossing the backyard, a basket in her hand. She wore a loose wrapper and scarf, as though trying not to draw attention. He watched her slip through the side path and vanish among the trees. The coffee went cold in his hand. The next week passed quietly, though Tunde's mind refused to rest. At the office, he tried to focus on his coding work, but his thoughts kept slipping toward that yellow house, the hidden path, and Adora's basket. He found himself replaying small details, her nervous laugh when he mentioned it, the way she avoided his eyes. By Friday, he decided that he was being unreasonable. People in Lagos were too used to scandal. Not every secret was shameful. Still, curiosity is a thing that grows when starved. On Saturday morning, Adora told him she was going to the market at Aja. "I'll be back soon," she said, taking her handbag and car keys. Tunde nodded. "Should I come with you?" "No," she replied quickly. "I'll be fast. You rest today." He watched her drive off and waited a while before following. He told himself he only wanted to surprise her, maybe buy something for lunch, but in truth, he wanted to see where she went, to know. The Aja market was already alive when he arrived. Women calling prices, baskets of tomatoes gleaming under the sun, the smell of fried plantain and smoke. He walked among the stalls, scanning faces. He didn't find Adora, but he overheard something that made him stop. Two market women stood by a pile of yams, gossiping in Yoruba. Their voices carried easily over the hum. "Have you seen that child again?" one asked. "The one with the bright face?" The other laughed softly. "Ah, the one that lives behind the new people's house. I saw her yesterday evening. The poor thing, such a pretty child, but her color." The first woman lowered her voice. "They say she doesn't go to school, always indoors. Her mother keeps her hidden." "Maybe she is not her mother," the other murmured. Tunde felt his heart thud. The yellow house, the hidden child. He lingered until they moved away, pretending to check the yams, but their words stayed sharp in his mind. When Adora returned that afternoon, she seemed cheerful. She brought back vegetables and fish, laughing about a stubborn trader who had overcharged her. Tunde said little. As she unpacked the groceries, he noticed her slip a small packet into her purse. Medicine, perhaps, or sweets. When she caught his gaze, she smiled too quickly. That evening, while she napped, he walked again to the back of the property. The path was damp from recent rain, and the air smelled of mango and wet sand. When he reached the yellow house, it was silent. A curtain moved slightly, as though someone had just stepped away from the window. He stood there for a long moment, listening. He could hear faint humming, a woman's voice, soft and low, then a child's cough. He turned and left before he was noticed. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every sound in the dark seemed to come from that direction. A rustle, a whisper, a creak. The next morning, he asked casually, "Who lives in that house again?" "You said a widow and her niece?" Adora didn't look up from her tea. "Yes," she said. "Have you ever been there?" She hesitated for the smallest instant. "Once, she was ill. I took her some food." Tunde nodded slowly. "You are kind." But he knew the hesitation told him more than words could. Something was being hidden from him. Something close enough to touch, yet just out of sight. And though his reason warned him to let it go, his heart whispered otherwise. For 2 days, Tunde avoided the path. He tried to act as if nothing had changed. Though his mind was restless, he walked long hours, came home late, spoke little. Adora noticed but said nothing. She had a gentle patience about her, a way of waiting for storms to pass. But on the third afternoon, the need to know became too strong. He returned early from work. The sun was sliding toward evening, the light golden and slow. The neighborhood was quiet, only the distant noise of a generator humming somewhere. He stood at the back veranda, watching the narrow path that led behind the house. After a while, Adora appeared at the doorway, trying her head scarf. "I'm going to see Mama Nkechi," she said. Tunde nodded. "All right. Should I come?" "No." It's just for a short while, she smiled, too gently. Don't worry yourself. He waited until her car turned out of the gate before following. The path seemed narrower now, hemmed by weeds and trees. He moved quietly, heart beating hard, though he didn't know why. When he reached the yellow-painted cottage, he stopped to listen. No sound. He stepped closer. The veranda was neat. A broom leaned by the door. A bowl of water set beside it. A child's sandals were there again. Small, pink, the straps worn thin. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still silence. Something made him glance toward the window. A small square pane curtained from within. Through the gap between the fabric and the frame, he saw the corner of a table, and above it, a wall dotted with children's drawings. He bent slightly to see clearer. One drawing caught his eye. It showed a man and a child standing by the water, holding hands. The child's face was painted bright yellow. The man is dark brown. Above them, in shaky handwriting, was a single word: Daddy. He drew back as if burned. For a moment, he stood motionless, his breath uneven. Then, hearing footsteps on the path, he turned and left quickly, ducking behind a hedge. Adora was returning. She carried a basket, the same one he had seen before, and walked toward the yellow house. She looked around, cautious, then knocked softly. The door opened from within, just enough for her to slip inside. Tunde felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He waited until she came out 15 minutes later, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. She stood for a while on the veranda, then turned and hurried back toward their home. That night, he said nothing. He lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling while she breathed quietly beside him. His thoughts spun in circles. A child in a hidden house, drawings that called someone daddy, a wife who went there secretly. There was only one explanation his heart could offer: the child was hers, and the man who once stood beside her, not him. He turned to look at her sleeping face, peaceful, tired, honest, or so he had always believed. Was she capable of such a lie? The mind often fears what the heart already suspects. In the dim light, Tunde closed his eyes, yet all he could see was the painted face, golden and bright, smiling at a man who was not him. The next morning came heavy with clouds. A soft drizzle hung in the air, and the lagoon stretched grey and restless beyond the trees. The house felt smaller, as though the walls themselves had grown cautious. Tunde ate his breakfast in silence. Adora moved about the kitchen, humming faintly. Every sound, the scrape of a spoon, the hiss of boiling water, seemed louder than usual. She looked at him once or twice. "You are quiet?" she said gently. "I'm thinking," he replied. "About work?" "Yes, work." But it was not work. It was the yellow house, the child's drawing, the word daddy. By afternoon, the drizzle had thickened into real rain. He sat by the window watching the water stripe down the glass, feeling the ache of something unspoken. When Adora came in with her shawl wet from the garden, he said, without turning his head, "Adora, who is the child in that yellow house?" The question hung between them like a bell still vibrating. For a moment, he stood motionless. Then she said quietly, "What child?" "You know which one." He turned to face her now. "I saw you go there. I saw the drawings on the wall. The one that called someone daddy." Her lips parted slightly. and for an instant, her eyes seemed to plead, not for forgiveness, but for time. "Tunde," she said slowly, "it's not what you think." "Then tell me what to think," he burst out. "Tell me why my wife goes to another house, hides a child and lies about it. Tell me, Adora, who is she?" She sank onto the chair, her hands trembling. "Please," she whispered, "not like this." The rain hammered the roof now, hard and unrelenting. Thunder rolled far off across the lagoon. "You should have trusted me," he said. "Whatever it is, you should have told me." "I want to," she said, tears filling her eyes. "I wanted to 100 times, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what? Of me? Of losing everything again?" He frowned. "Again?" She covered her face. "I can't. Not now. Please, just let me explain when my mind is clear." But something inside him had already snapped. The silence between them became too wide. "Then don't," he said coldly. "I will find out myself." He rose, took his car keys and left the house. The rain lashed at him as he drove. The road shimmered under the storm, puddles splashing up against the tires. He didn't know exactly where he was going until he saw the mango trees, the same ones that guarded the narrow path behind his home. He stopped the car and stepped out. His clothes were soaked within seconds, but he didn't care. The yellow house stood ahead, dim in the rain. He went to the door and tried to handle. It was locked. He knocked hard. "Hello? Anyone inside?" No answer. He circled the house, looking for another way in. Through a side window, he thought he saw movement, a flicker of light, or maybe just the storm playing tricks. He pressed his palms to the glass. "Open the door," he said. "Please." Nothing. The thunder cracked, closed this time, and the wind drove the rain sideways. He turned away, defeated, his anger giving way to something heavier. Fear, confusion, the sting of betrayal that hadn't yet found a shape. By the time he reached home, Adora's car was gone. Her clothes, her purse, everything still in place, but she herself had vanished into the storm. Tunde stood in the doorway, dripping, staring at the empty living room. Outside, lightning flared over the lagoon, bright and blinding. Somewhere in that flash of light, he thought he saw again the face from the drawing, golden, innocent, waiting to be understood. The storm passed in the night, leaving the air heavy and washed clean. When dawn came, the light crept pale across the lagoon, and the trees stood dripping quietly, as if listening for something. Tunde had not slept. He had waited for Adora to return, pacing the rooms like a man walking through his own doubt. By morning, her phone was still off. Her clothes lay neatly folded on the chair, her shoes by the door, everything in its place except her. He sat on the veranda for a long time, his head in his hands. The stillness of the morning only deepened the ache inside him. Finally, as the sun rose higher, he made a decision. He went back to the yellow house. The path was soft with mud, and his shoes left deep prints. Birds called from the trees, breaking the silence. The house looked smaller in daylight, almost fragile, the paint peeling at the edges. He knocked, no answer. He called out softly, "Is anyone here?" Silence. He reached for the handle. This time, it turned. The door opened inward with a slow creak. The first thing that met him was the smell of soap and something faintly medicinal. The room was neat. A table with folded clothes, a kettle on the stove, a chair pushed under the window. On the wall were the drawings he had seen before. each one bright with the clumsy joy of a child's hand. He stepped further inside, heart beating unevenly. There were photographs, pinned beside the drawings, old, some water-stained in them. Adora was younger, wearing a nurse's uniform. Beside her stood a white man with a broad smile, his arm around her shoulders. Between them, a baby, light-skinned, small, eyes half closed. The photos were labeled faintly on the back. Kano, 2016, Clinic Volunteers. He felt the world tilt slightly, as if he were standing on a moving boat. He turned toward the sound of a cough. From the doorway of the inner room, a little girl stood watching him. She could not have been more than 6 or 7. Her hair was braided in tiny rows, her eyes large and clear. Her skin had a soft, golden tone that caught the morning light like a reflection. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the child said quietly, "Are you Uncle Tunde?" His throat tightened. "Yes," he said, uncertain even of the word. She smiled faintly. "Mommy said you might come. She said not to be afraid." He took a slow step forward. "Where is she now?" "She went to find medicine," the girl said. "She will come back." Tunde knelt to her height. "What's your name?" "Amara," she replied. "It means grace." He nodded, his voice low. "It's a beautiful name." She pointed to the drawings on the wall. "Do you like them? Mommy says I draw better now. That one?" She pointed to the picture of the man and the child by the water. "That's you. I drew it when she showed me your photo." He looked at the small golden face drawn in crayon, smiling up at a figure that resembled him. Something inside him cracked softly, not in anger, but in the slow ache of understanding. He turned away, blinking hard. "Amara," he said gently, "are you hungry?" She shook her head. Mommy made pap before she left. He walked to the table, his hands trembling slightly. The photographs, the drawings, the scent of Adora's presence. All of it told him that this was not betrayal, but history. A history she had carried quietly, fearing the world's cruelty more than his anger. He sat in the chair, staring at the photo of Adora, holding the infant, and waited for her to return, for the story to make sense. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the lagoon shimmered under the late morning sun. After a while, footsteps approached on the path. He turned as the door opened. Adora stood there, her face pale, her dress damp from walking. She held a small paper bag of medicine in one hand, and when she saw him sitting there, her eyes filled at once. "Tunde," she whispered. He said nothing. He only looked at her, the woman he thought he knew, and the child he had never met, bound together by a truth that was both fragile and profound. "Now," he said quietly, "tell me everything." Adora stood in the doorway, rain damp and trembling. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the slow dripping from her shawl onto the floor. Amara ran to her and clung to her waist. Adora bent down and kissed the child's head, then looked up again at Tunde. Eyes red, tired, yet calm, with the resolve of one who has carried silence too long. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. "From the beginning I wanted to, but I was afraid of what the truth might cost." Tunde's voice was steady. "You should tell it now." She nodded, and her eyes moved toward the wall, toward the old photographs. She touched one gently, the one of her in the nurse's uniform. "It was before I met you," she began. "In 2016, I volunteered with a medical team in Kano. After the cholera outbreak, we worked in small camps near the border, poor places forgotten by everyone. There was a doctor there, a foreigner from Ireland. His name was Michael. He was kind, serious, very devoted to his work. I learned a lot from him. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. When the camps closed, most of the volunteers went home, but Michael stayed. I stayed too. We opened a small clinic together. It was not meant to be anything romantic. We were simply two people who shared the same burden. But when you work with death and suffering every day, hearts grow close without asking permission. Tunde listened quietly, his face unreadable. One evening, he fell ill, a fever. Within a week, he was gone. We buried him near the hills. I was already carrying Amara then. The organization promised to help, but after the outbreak ended, they left and I had nowhere to go. People in the camp whispered about the child, saying she wasn't mine, that she was cursed, that her golden skin meant witchcraft. She drew Amara closer. It's a condition called vitiligo. The doctor explained it before he died, but to them, it was a mark of something unclean. I ran away. I came back to the south to start over. I told no one about her except an old friend who helped me find this house. She stayed here safe while I worked and tried to build a life that wouldn't shame her. Her eyes filled again. When I met you, Tunde, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell you about her, but I saw how people stared at mixed children in the street, how cruel even family could be. I told myself that when the time was right, I would bring her home, but each day that passed made the truth heavier. I feared you would think I had deceived you, so I kept her here, where no one could hurt her. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Tunde looked at the child, small, quiet, her golden-toned face lifted toward her mother. Then he looked at Adora. "You thought I would hate her?" he said quietly. "I thought you might hate me," she whispered, "for hiding her from my past." He exhaled slowly. "You trusted the world less than you trusted my love." She closed her eyes. "Yes." For a moment, he said nothing. The light through the window felt soft across the drawings on the wall, bright and innocent. Then, very quietly, he said, "Adora, look at me." She raised her eyes. "You've carried this alone too long," he said. "But love isn't a thing that disappears because the truth is heavy. You should have trusted that." Her tears came freely then, not of fear this time, but of release. Tunde knelt beside Amara and smiled faintly. "Do you know," he said, "that when I was small, I used to think the sun painted the skin of people it liked best?" The child giggled softly. "Then it must like me a lot." He nodded. "I think it does." Adora pressed her hand to her mouth, trembling between sobs and laughter. For the first time in years, the air between them was clear. No lies, no shadows, only the fragile brightness of truth. The morning after the confession, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, washed, and the clouds hung low like folded lining. Tunde stood by the veranda, watching the street slowly wake up. Somewhere beyond the gate, a hawker sang out the day's first call. "Hot bread! Fresh bread!" Behind him, Adora was dressing Amara for school. The house, once heavy with silence, now felt alive. The sound of the child's laughter rose through the rooms like birds returning after Harmattan. He turned when Adora came out. Her hands clasped together uncertainly. "You haven't said what you'll do," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Do? About us? About her?" He looked down the road again before answering. "Yesterday," He said, I was angry. Not because you had a past, but because I was not part of your burden. I kept thinking, how could you hide something so important from me? But last night, I understood. She stepped closer. I saw how small she slept between us. He continued, how peaceful she looked. I thought that child never asked to be born into hiding. And you, Adora, you did what you thought love demanded. Protection, even if it meant loneliness. Maybe you were wrong to hide her, but you were right to love her. Her voice broke. You mean? I mean, he said gently, that love doesn't come to measure the past. It comes to build what remains. He took her hand. It was trembling. He squeezed it once, firm and sure. Tomorrow, he said, we'll go to her school together. You, me, and Amara. The world can stare if it wants. I'm done living by the eyes of strangers. Adora's tears returned, but they were soft this time, without shame. She whispered, I thought I would lose you. He smiled. You almost did, but the truth kept you. They stood there, silent, while the sunlight slowly broke through the clouds. Down the street, Amara ran ahead, her golden skin catching the morning light. The neighbors paused and watched, whispering, curious, uncertain. But the child only laughed louder, her voice rising like a hymn of its own. Tunde and Adora followed behind, their shadows merging on the ground. And as they reached the gate, Tunde thought of all the nights he had spent haunted by suspicion and doubt, and how easily the truth, when finally spoken, could undo years of darkness. He looked once more at the small, radiant face before him, that golden face that had almost torn his peace apart, and realized that it had instead taught him something he would never forget. That love, when it is true, can survive even the strange light of revelation.